actors are hereditary. The families in acting can go back probably hundreds, maybe some of them maybe thousands of years. Specialized sections of society, once more, and they marry each other and intermarry within even smaller ranks. What's more interesting is the producers, the magicians, you might say, who understand and have a full grasp of what is to be conveyed to the audience, what messages must be imprinted in them, in their minds, and he knows the techniques and how to do this perfectly. A perfect science.
to 40 group, take your places, please. Right. Let's see which one of us can touch his toes. Right over from the hips, brothers and sisters, please. 1, 2. 1, 2. 1, 2. 1, 2. Smith? 6079 Smith W. Yes, you. Bend lower. You're not trying. Watch me. There, brother. That's what I want. Anyone under 45 is perfectly capable of touching his toes. I'm 39 and I've had 4 children. We don't all have the privilege of fighting in the front line. Remember our boys on the Malabar front. Just think what they have to put up with.
Most people want to belong to their peer group. They want to be the same as everyone else when it comes to opinions. In fact, they judge their own personal sanity by bouncing ideas off their neighbours and friends who will answer back and agree on these same topics in kind. It doesn't matter if the topics or what you're given are facts or utter nonsense, as long as everyone agrees at the same time. You'll say, well, I'm sane. And your friends will all agree because they've had the same information given to them. We don't only get the same information given to us, we're led through sequences, even documentaries, to leave you with a predetermined fixed conclusion on any given topic. Most folk are, once again, unaware of this. They think, I've just been given all the facts on this topic, and this is the obvious conclusion, which is always given to you by the final experts on the particular program. There's no thinking involved. We tie this in with the Brzezinski. Brzezinski said in 2 Ages. Now this guy was way up with the NSA. He's a master geopolitician. He admits he works in 20, 50-year periods to do with geopolitics in other countries. But he said himself, the public will shortly be unable to think or reason for themselves. He says he was meaning by the form of information that was given to them, the type, the formulas that were in use then in the 1970s. And eventually, he said, they will expect the media to do all their thinking and reasoning for them. Well, that's happened today. That's why people today can't think outside of the programming from television. I'll give an instance, in fact, of why TV was so important, to show you that it was so important to have it in the homes of ordinary people. Now, most countries in Europe, for instance, up into the 1950s and 60s, and I'll give an example, is Britain. The working class people did not have credit cards. You could not get a credit card. You couldn't get a bank loan without collateral to put something up against it. So therefore you were at pretty well a fixed income. There was no extra cash outside of rent, food and so on, clothes for the children. essentials. There was no extras for luxuries. There was no credit given to them. Yet the British government, just like the Chinese government did 2 years ago, made it a mandate that every household in Britain must get a television set. And what they did, they made one exception out of all the things that the people could need, really needed. They made one exception. They allowed credit companies to come into being. They could go round the houses every week and collect half a crown or 5 shillings or whatever it was and pay off a used television set. The British government made a deal with the United States of America to buy in used televisions which were then reconditioned to be sold to the working class all across Britain. As I say, they wanted a TV in every home. Now, since when is government interested in how happy you are at home? There's another reason for this. And sure enough, the working classes all got these DER. DER was the company that brought them all into Britain. And the guys came around every weekend collecting their half crown, 5 shillings. And suddenly this, and I can remember where I was, it was one of the last areas really to get television, a real working class area. I can remember this high being taken by my parents to the local park on a weekend and passing dozens and dozens and dozens of other couples on the way with their toddlers as well. When he got to the park, which was a valley, there were over maybe 1,000, 1,500 couples along the grass in the valley. And that's where everything was discussed. Local politics, national politics, labor unions to do with their mining and so on. And everyone mingled with everyone else, old school friends and so on. That system had been going on for hundreds of years, where people communicated thoughts, real feelings, real things that really mattered to them and their communities, to each other, conversation. When the TV came in, and I was still about this high, within about a month, I could go down that park every weekend and no one was there. It literally overnight killed off the socialization and the interaction between people and tradition, again, where they exchanged viewpoints, gave each other news, helped each other out, who was sick, who was this, who was that. Everyone helped each other out. And from then on, you could pass rows and rows and rows of these old, and they were called row houses, all joined together. And all you saw at night was the flickering of that bluish light in the windows. And that was the end. That was the end of real communities. It happened within a matter of about a month. The flicker rate on the television is very, very important. It was timed to be so many cycles per second, and it actually just meets with the brain patterns for an alpha state. When our brain sees it through our eyes, we start to adopt that flicker rate in our mind, and we go into a deep alpha state. Watch children and watch their mouths. They drop open. They won't hear their parents talking. They're hypnotized, in fact. Why would they give that particular flicker rate when they could have chosen of a whole variety of flicker rates? It wasn't an essential thing to have. So it was done for a purpose. It was meant to be hypnotic. It was meant to be used as a tool of propaganda and indoctrination, even through the guise of entertainment and so on. It also was to create a new society because they were the avant-garde, as I say, leading the sexual revolution through drama, through little documentaries, fiction, non-fiction, all combined. Once again, back to Plato. The audience see what they see. You understand that it's even worked out towards different age groups. There's something on for everybody's age group. Each age group is actually being updated as well, even the elderly ones, into new ways of thinking or seeing things. But the target mainly was for youngsters. If we take one of the world's experts on propaganda, who was Jacques Ellul, who wrote extensively on how the mind works and how all entertainment, he said, that has to do with government programs such as police, detective stories, detective series, which contain little human dramas as the hook that you identify with to make you watch the whole story. The child gets kidnapped, detective goes on a hunt. He goes through hell and fire to get that child back. You identify with the hero if you're a male. You'll identify with the heroine if you're female. And that's the hook to get you to watch them. But what he said was, all dramas to do with police, or even the military in movies, are pure propaganda. Pure propaganda. The human story is just the bait to make you watch through it, to get you to identify with it. Because once again, there's always a message left somewhere in the movie. It might even be a message that's against your own morality. It could be where the cop, for instance, does sleep with this beautiful woman while his wife was at home, and it's all part of the story, and even tell you why he did this. He was feeling down that day, blah, blah, blah. And so you've just again altered your viewpoints on how you yourself might behave in that situation. And that sometimes that kind of thing can be justified. That's how you're downloaded through entertainment. It's there to alter and direct and always upgrade into another step of the direction that the entire culture for someone else's purpose. Let's talk about the effects of the alpha state first of all. Recent articles I've even read on the air from various science studies show you that even when you switch off television, you remain in that alpha state for maybe 45 minutes to an hour, sometimes longer, depending on how long you've been watching it. With high definition, again, why would a president of a country mandate that all TVs had to go high definition? Is it because he really cares so much about your happiness? And he wants better quality for you? Or is there another reason for it? Well, I'm sure the effects of the old flicker rates and what it did will also be incorporated in high definition, but with even more added benefits for bringing you into a complete hypnotic state. How do you wake someone up who's addicted to television? You can't. Very, very simple. You can't get your daily brainwashing where literally it's bypassing any consciousness in the person. You can't take that every day and still try to wake up and learn at the same time. I've known people who've gone through complete withdrawal from television and gone into depressions because their entire routine is broken. They also have time on their hands, which is a big aspect of control, remember too. If you can take time away from a person who can think for themselves, who might say, oh, I'll go and read a book, I'll go and study something, or if you can take that time away from them and have them mesmerized in front of a television set, then you'll keep them dumb, stupid, compliant, and going along with the system. I always advise to people, if you know someone who's watching TV, it's quite simple to find out where they are mentally, psychologically, in the understanding of things. You can ask them a few simple questions. If they give you standard television answers, forget it. Simple as that, forget it. If you see some spark of their own opinion coming in, there's maybe a chance you can do something with them. But you cannot get out. You see, television, it can be classified as a drug. Any addiction is still an addiction. Television is an addiction. People watch 4 or 5 hours per day. If you want to advise people on television, and you can do this with yourself, how to train yourself, how to watch television. If you never get involved, you understand a storyline, you watch a movie, but don't get involved in, as I say, there's always a thread or a hook for you to follow, a plot, whatever, the chase. The guy always ends up with the beautiful woman at the end after going through hell to rescue a child or whatever it happens to be, or save the world. If you can stop yourself from getting lost in the emotional part of it and study the movie as you're watching it, you'll learn the techniques that have been implanted in the movie itself. That's a great way to learn. If you can do it with yourself, you can also show other people how to do this, to actually study everything as it's been presented to you. And eventually what you'll find is that when you're watching even documentaries, you'll see how the documentaries themselves are shaped to give you the opinions, often very strong opinions, without giving you specific facts or giving you distorted facts, etc. Learn how to critically analyze and think as you're watching. And if you can show others this technique, a good example is sit down with someone who regularly watches a good movie, one that you've previously watched, and then point out all the politically correct little inserted words, slogans, phrases that have been put in there, and show them how it's been done. That way it can actually be fun to study television and write down all the different things that they've missed, but it's all implanted subconsciously in their mind, because those implants, those subconscious implants, will become their opinions, and they will never know how they arrived at them. They won't remember it's from this particular documentary, this particular movie, or whatever.
.75% of the commercial network television time is paid for by the 100 largest corporations in North America. Some corporations have television budgets that range into the billions per year. Television producers compromise and end up mitigating their desires for those of the advertisers. Thus, television is effectively a private medium for their use only. The longer a person watches television, the more easily the brain slips into alpha level, a slow, steady brainwave pattern in which the mind is in its most receptive mode. Images and suggestions are implanted directly into the mind without viewer participation. An effective hypnosis is induced, and the viewer surrenders to the unending television image stream. Images of television violence stimulate the fight-or-flight instinct. But since it would be absurd to react to television violence, the viewer suppresses the emotion. Viewers are drawn back and forth on cycles of impulse and suppression. When the set goes off, this stored-up energy bursts forth in frantic behavior commonly associated with childhood hyperactivity. Television imagery is jammed together in a steady stream of information, fracturing your attention while condensing and accelerating time. These events would not happen in ordinary life. They are technical alterations only possible within the moving image media. Living in the rapid world of television imagery, ordinary life is dull by comparison, and often far too slow. People who immersed in the surrogate reality of television life deal on a daily basis with a reality totally unlike any that has preceded it. The image stream is a steady, mixed-up stream of real, unreal, and semi-real events. All of these events end up merging with each other and becoming just another set of stored imagery that have all similar reality values.
Volts of electricity burst into flame.
Bringing entertainment to thousands of people. Through its magic, we are able to enjoy a combination of the radio, motion pictures, and the stage, right in the comfort of our own homes, simply by pushing a button and turning a dial. These cells with their electrical charges are scanned by a stream of electrons, completing 30 pictures a second. Compare that crude picture with these of today, and you can judge for yourself how far along the road to perfection television has traveled.
Most people still today think that all entertainment to do with movies, drama, is therefore nothing more than their entertainment. It never ever was that case.
Of course, television can't perform such miracles as this, yet. But perhaps there's no harm wishing that it could.
The greatest social messages are promoted through movies and drama, high drama, through the fixation of emotive sequences, emotional sequences, not logical, factual sequences, but pushing points across in an emotional way which register and fix in the mind. So emotional content is very, very important, rather than going through an actual discussion or an argument using logic and facts. There's no debate. And when you're being downloaded through fiction, your guard is down, the censor part of your brain is not in action. It isn't saying, yes, I agree with this, I disagree with that, as you would in a debate or a lecture. You're actually in an alpha state, being completely downloaded with new ideas.
Throughout history, social engineers have refined techniques designed to control large populations.
About 100 years ago, this big organization with many branches, they wanted to rule the world basically using Britain as a nucleus of a system, an embryo, which also was going to be joined with the US under the Anglo-American establishment, wrote about the kind of culture and the changes of culture over a 100-year period that they would actually design, implement and bring in. And H.G. Wells talked about it too. He talked about arenas. He says arenas could be put up across the world for sports, for instance. Now at that time, sports was something that children, school children were into. Adults became adults and got onto adult things. So it was unimaginable at the time that people could actually believe that there was even a need for adult sports and entertainment, never mind having arenas built across the world. But he said we can do this, and foist basically a sports culture for the males. Using a tribal system, we're all tribal to an extent. That's why we even bother to vote for a tribal leader. This is well understood. That's why we're supplied with these leaders. And because the average man was to become more disengaged from his own destiny as the expert class arose, it was decided that the males would get their outlet basically, gradually becoming helpless as males through sports. Therefore they'd have a tribal team they could identify with, they could cheer them on as they were winning. In their own personal lives, they were getting nowhere. They were getting disenfranchised in a sense as experts took over decision-making for them in all kinds of fields. So this was psychology at use, planned before they even implemented the sports. When radio came along, of course, they used that to the maximum. Sports for the men, soaps basically for the women. And then in came television, as I say, with its alpha state, its hypnotic state. And sure enough, around the 1960s, really, 50s and 60s, it took off. It really, really took off. And men became glued on Saturday nights to the sports shows.
Don't protest your government. Here, watch some sports and scream and shout in ways that won't cause any concern or dissension. And that way, this transition into tyranny will be easy for all of us.
Symbols are used by Masonic lodges, witch covens, Satanists and alchemists to directly access parts of the brain which respond to strong shapes and colours. Just as the saying goes, a picture paints 1,000 words, So magical symbols can be used to convey a multi-layered message or command. The use of symbols to convey the desire or will of the magician is generally referred to as sigil magic.
CBS 11 News at 10 starts right now.
Live from Fort Worth, Dallas, and all of North Texas, with coverage you can count on, this is CBS 11 News at 10.
Starting right now on ABC's This Week. Out of control. The Ebola outbreak spreading fast. And now, the race to save 2 Americans stricken with a killer virus. This morning, breaking details on the emergency mission to bring the first patient home. From ABC News, This Week with George Stephanopoulos begins now.
Good morning. It's an image sparking hope and fear for so many Americans. Christian missionary and Ebola patient Dr. Kent Brantley back in the U.S.
It's Friday, and that means it's not top 10 time.
That's why you can't. That's why you can't. That's why you can't.
Here again, the shape, this arch with this 90 degree. I know this shot is a little blurry right here because it's just sort of a transition screen. And again, these are just, and understand, these are highly technical. Look at how detailed all of this is just for a fraction of a second of time, which means this is being targeted towards your subconscious mind on purpose. Because these folks that are making these things know that your conscious mind does not perceive these things at this frame rate. You cannot even pick up on it consciously, which is the whole point. So I'll continue to go slowly forward, and we'll notice certain shapes again. This interlocking pattern will be visible over and over and over again to you in different mnemonic circles, sequences, on different channels on TV and different programs that you're being programmed with. And so here we go. Here's another spinning mnemonic that comes right out of the center of that one. and everything spins in here. I'm going to kind of just go through this now until we come to some more parts. And again, there's the count up. So as this thing starts off, it's a count up. So watch, it shows you 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. It's a count up, okay? And then the next process is a count down. And what they do, and all of this is well documented, and if you research mind control and hypnosis and hypnotic techniques, it's well documented that if you want to put somebody in a very, very deep trance, one way to do it is to bring them up and down, in and out of hypnotic states.
Police say it's a sheer miracle that no one was killed by the car bomb in County Down.
This is a Fox News alert.
Good afternoon, I'm Stacey Scheibel, and this is First at 4. We begin with news from Pinellas County, where yet another child has been left in a car.
Live from the financial capital of the world, the New York Stock Exchange. This is Squawk on the Street. Let's go around the horn. Good morning, everybody. I'm Mark Haynes. More sour economic news, pushing the futures significantly lower. The morning after stocks hit a 5.5-year low.
Live from the CBS Broadcast Center in New York City, this is CBS 2 News at 11.
Blown out of the... Blown out of the sky, a fireball and smoke after a passenger plane is shot down over Ukraine. And tonight the world wants to know who's behind the attack.
To St. Louis for the NFL on CBS.
How many passes does the team in white make?
Go!
The answer is 13. But did you see the moonwalking bear?
So absolutely, numerology is important, and you're right to connect it to the sporting events, because I should also mention too, with the sporting events, I view a lot of them as they're tied into mafia organizations, they're tied into money laundering and gambling, and so that can also be a factor in what numbers are chosen. And you can find some really good interviews with Brian Toohey, I believe is his name, where he talks about the rigging of sports games. And so I think that all ties into it. Absolutely, you're 100% correct. And yeah, that ritual magic aspect of it, I think, is very important. And we actually saw Christine Lagarde from the IMF, it was 2 years ago, give a speech at the National Press Club where she said literally that the magic number 7 is very important in the dates that we choose for making big economic decisions.
That is so funny. Yeah, I actually had Brian on the show here at the Leak Project just about a week ago. He's a nice guy. He definitely brought up some good points. Do you remember when Ray Lewis said that he was talking about the Skull and Bones and the Illuminati, and then I think it was the halftime show during the Super Bowl, or almost halftime actually, right before halftime, all the power went out in the stadium, and the time was like, was it 3:22 or something?
Yes, I do remember that. I was in Nashville at the time, and I remember very vividly that listening on the radio at the time, people were talking about how, this sudden blackout. Yes.
That'd be interesting if it was at 3:22, because I think that is the number of the Skull and Bones. So
it is, right. That's Lodge 322, correct?
Yeah, fascinating. Now, you were
Karl Marx, the father of communism, once famously claimed that religion was the opiate of the masses, when in reality, it's football. There isn't a bigger and more important event in people's lives than the big game. There isn't a bigger bread and circus distracting Americans from issues that actually matter while their gangster government gallops out of control, while they're psychologically sedated with their modern-day gods in this godless world. After all, the Super Bowl is the most viewed television event every year. George Orwell, the author of 1984, had a very interesting and revealing quote about football, where he stated, "Heavy physical work, the care of home and children, petty quarrels with neighbors, films, football, beer, and above all gambling, filled the horizons of people's minds. To keep them in control was not difficult. All that was required of them was a primitive patriotism which could be appealed to whenever it was necessary to make them accept longer working hours or shorter rations. And when they became discontented, as they sometimes did, their discontentment led nowhere, because without general ideas they could only focus it on petty grievances." Petty grievances, sort of like the replacement ref debacle last year. You may recall that America virtually rioted and was in an absolute national uproar after the replacement refs robbed the Green Bay Packers of a victory in a last-second Hail Mary, because there was a union labor dispute, a union contract dispute in the NFL amongst the refs. So some replacement refs were brought in, making a terrible call, causing the Green Bay Packers to lose one of their games. You know, it is interesting that Walter Camp, the father of American football, was a member of Skull and Bones, the American branch of the Illuminati. Also equally interesting is the fact that James Naismith, the founder of American basketball, was a Freemason. You see, the American public have been fed this false, icon-driven bread and circus to keep them distracted. It is the opiate of the masses. Most Americans can tell you more about their favorite football team than they can tell you about the Bill of Rights. They've watched more hours of football virtually than investing their time and energy into anything else. Their love and adoration for the game has made the Super Bowl a virtual holiday in America. It's Super Bowl Sunday. So Karl Marx, claiming that religion is the opiate of the masses, couldn't be further from the truth. I mean, if anything, religion inspires people to stand up against tyrants. Jesus himself was a revolutionary, telling people to go and sell some of their clothes and buy a sword for self-defense if they did not have one, breaking the chains of the spiritual supremacists, the modern-day Pharisees of his time, only to then have the Vatican and the Catholic Church come and gather and hide the teachings of Jesus and try to package it up and sell it and distort it, to try to keep people ignorant, just the same way that the ancient Pharisees did. Americans have become so out of touch that in one of my recent Man on the Street Monday petition videos, I got them to sign a petition to put Karl Marx on the ballot for 2016. I just told Obama supporters that Obama has endorsed Karl Marx for the next president, but we still needed some signatures, and so they gladly signed their name and birthday to approve of Karl Marx, the father of communism, to be the next president, showing how out of touch they are. But I'll bet you they could name the quarterback for virtually every football team in America. I bet they could spew the latest statistics and who got injured and who threw this pass and all the personal lives of their celebrity football stars. But yet these people don't even know who Karl Marx is, have lost touch with reality. It has been supplemented with a fictionalized, Illuminati-themed and controlled, icon-based mind control. It's mainstream mind control. So, I just put this out there for people to question their own priorities. Football, the most important thing in life. Football ruins people's Mondays. If their team loses on the weekend, it ruins their whole week. You know, you'll see your friends posting on Facebook about a play that was botched, about a bad call that was made by the refs. Are they tweeting or posting on Facebook about Obama, the drone-dropping devil, just killing countless people with his radio-controlled murder machines, the drones, the UAVs, the unmanned aerial vehicles? No, that's not important enough for them to go and get mad about and post on Facebook, but they get mad about their team losing or one of the refs making a bad call, costing their team a couple yards, man. Oh, I'm going to go and vent on Facebook. My team's going to lose, man. No, but they're not venting about their freedoms being destroyed. They're not venting about the invisible empire, the Illuminati icons controlling their government. No, they're not reading a book about the Federal Reserve. They're not reading any books about the Skull and Bones secret society. They're reading Sports Illustrated, man. Pumped up these Illuminati icons in the mainstream, these false gods. They're literally idols that people worship.
Go ahead, you started.
All right, well, in 1925 we had the first television in the United States, and it was a mechanical television. And this was a huge wooden box with a tiny little screen, about 3-inch square screen. So the viewer would sit in front of this box and stare into the tiny little screen, and they would see an orange flicker. And the flicker was 18 frames per second. So try to imagine looking at 18 pictures in 1 second and taking all of that information in and getting to see every picture. Well, your conscious mind cannot do that. It cannot handle that. So basically the conscious mind kind of steps aside and you go into a light trance. Then your subconscious mind takes all of the information in. Whether any of it makes sense or not, whether it's rational or not, it doesn't matter. The subconscious mind takes it all in. So that was 1925. So the very first television was already putting people in a state of hypnosis. Then in 1927 we had our first TV broadcast in the United States. The very first TV station was called W3XK. And for those who know a little bit about gematria, 3x is actually 666. Well, this very first broadcast went from Washington, D.C. to New York City. And the main part of the demonstration was a speech given by Herbert Hoover, who was the Secretary of Commerce at the time. So after this little demonstration, the development of the TV kind of went quiet in the United States. What it did do was go over to Nazi Germany, where they worked very hard on developing the TV and experimenting with people, getting to understand about the human psyche, how to control human behavior. It wasn't until the early 1950s that TV started to become popular in the United States. But what happened was in Nazi Germany in 1936, they had 28 different viewing stations in Berlin where 150,000 Germans went to see the Olympic Games on a widescreen TV. I think it was like a 40-inch widescreen TV. That's pretty amazing, right? So then in the 1950s, TV starts going into people's homes in the United States. And we know that Project Paperclip happened where all the Nazi scientists came over and they were put into all the top positions in scientific laboratories and academic institutions. So they just continued their research in the United States. We know some of this from the 1977 Senate hearing on MK Ultra, where the CIA had about 144 projects that it was working on concerning the control of human behavior, and some of this included hypnosis. And there are a number of patents that are out there on the internet. In fact, we have a link to some patents in the post Television Sigil Magic. And I wanted to read one of these to you. This is patent number, U.S. patent number 6506148, nervous system manipulation by electromagnetic fields from monitors. Physiological effects have been observed in a human subject in response to stimulation of the skin with weak electromagnetic fields that are pulsed with certain frequencies, near 1/2 Hz to 2.4 Hz, such as to excite a sensory resonance. Many computer monitors and TV tubes, when displaying pulsed images, emit pulsed electromagnetic fields of sufficient amplitudes to cause such excitation. It is therefore possible to manipulate the nervous system of a subject by pulsing images displayed on a nearby computer monitor or TV set. For the latter, the image pulsing may be embedded in the program material, or it may be overlaid by modulating videos. So basically, what the TV does, first of all, it puts you into a state of hypnosis. Normally, during the day and waking consciousness, your brain is in a beta wave state, a normal beta wave. Then when you sit down in front of the TV, about 15 to 30 seconds into it, your mind is going into an alpha state, which is a light trance. So this is how it begins. And the more you watch TV, the deeper the trance can be. They use imagery, really rapid succession of this image to this image, of this scene, that scene, this scene, that scene. This also causes the trance to be a little bit deeper because the consciousness can't take everything in at once. The subconscious is being filled with this information. They use harmonics, sound waves, they can actually embed information through your neural pathways going to your subconscious mind. It's known that a frequency of 10 hertz will put a human into a hypnotic state. Now, if we were all vibrating at 7.83 hertz, which is the Schumann resonance, the natural frequency of the Earth, then we'd probably all be pretty healthy and doing pretty well for ourselves. But we've got all the cell phone towers, the land towers, the heart frequencies. So the harmonics are used to embed information. Also on TV they use trauma-based mind control, which is something actually that Illuminati families do to their children. They abuse their children and they make their conscious minds dissociate, and they create different alters. They create like multiple personality disorder in their children. They do the same thing with TV shows and movies.
Time now for the ridiculous. You've heard of Where in the World is Matt Lauer? Well, tonight we're asking, what in the world is up with Al Roker? And I asked this question with the utmost admiration and affection for Al Roker. I really like the guy. Now, a few days ago, on the Today Show, Savannah Guthrie and Matt Lauer were talking about an upcoming performance from Lionel Richie. Savannah Guthrie was saying that Lionel Richie takes her back to the days of junior high school dances, and then this happened.
Will someone do the junior high hop dance? It's like this. You gotta make it real awkward.
That's exactly how you have to have a certain amount of distance between the bodies in junior high.
Yes, like they say in Catholic school, leave room for the Holy Ghost. Anyway, there is a lot of memories today, actually. It's a big day in music history.
35 years ago today, Elvis Presley passed away, the king of rock and roll. And as Mark Cohn says in his great song, Walking in Memphis, there's a pretty little thing waiting for the king down in the jungle room. Natalie Morales.
Now, I think they were talking about Elvis, something in the jungle room. I couldn't pay attention because Al Roker just kind of froze like that. He stood completely still with that look on his face for 17 seconds. 17 seconds, that's like a day and a half in live TV time. And I need to know what that was about. It's not as if he didn't know he was on camera. He wasn't caught like a deer in the headlights like our favorite college TV newsroom employee who taught us all that these stop drops.
Shopping for this holiday season. It's okay, you can admit it if you bought an item or 2 or 10 for yourself.
Well, it's okay, you can admit it if you have bought an item or 2 or maybe 10 for yourself. It's okay, you can admit it if you bought an item or 2 or 10 for yourself.
It's okay, you can admit it if you bought an item or 2 or 10 for yourself.
It's okay, you can admit it if you bought an item or 2 or 10 for yourself. It's okay, you can admit it if you bought an item or 2 or 10 for yourself.
It's okay, you can admit it, Todd, if you bought an item or 2 or 10 for yourself.
It's okay, you can admit it if you bought an item or 2 or 10 for yourself. It's okay, you can admit it if you bought an item or 2 or maybe 10 for yourself. It's okay, you can admit it if you bought an item or 2 for yourself.
It's okay, you can admit it if you bought 1 or 2 or maybe 3 or 4, maybe even 10 items for yourself. It's okay, you can admit it if you bought an item or 2 or 10 for yourself.
It's okay, you can admit it if you bought an item or 2 or 10 for yourself.
It's okay, you can admit it if you bought an item or 2 or 10 for yourself. It's okay, you can admit it if you bought an item or 2 or maybe 10 for yourself.
It's okay, you can admit it if you bought maybe an item or 2 or 10 for yourself. It's okay, you can admit it if you bought an item or 2 or 3 or 10 for yourself. It's okay, you can admit it if you bought an item or 2 or 10 for yourself.
It's okay, you can admit it if you bought an item or 2 or 10 for you.
It's okay, you can admit it.
If you bought an item or 2
It's okay, you can admit it if you bought an item or 2 or 10 for yourself. It's okay, you can admit it if you bought an item or 2 or 10 for yourself. It's okay, admit it if you bought an item or 2 or 10 for yourself.
It's okay, you can admit it if you bought yourself 1 or 2 or 10 things for yourself because a lot of people do it.
Economic factors may take some spring out of the Easter Bunny step this year.
Economic factors may take some spring out of the Easter Bunny step this year.
Economic factors may take some spring out of the Easter Bunny step this year.
Economic factors may take some spring out of the Easter Bunny step this year.
Economic factors may take some spring out of the Easter Bunny step this year.
Economic factors may take some spring out of the Easter Bunny step this year.
Economic factors may take some spring out of the Easter Bunny step this year. Economic factors may take some spring out of the Easter Bunny step this year. Economic factors may take some spring out of the Easter Bunny step this year.
Economic factors may take some spring out of the Easter Bunny step this year.
Economic factors may take some spring out of the Easter Bunny step this year. Economic factors may take some spring out of the Easter Bunny step this year.
Economic factors may take some spring out of the Easter Bunny step this year.
Economic factors may take some spring out of the Easter Bunny step this year.
Economic factors may take some spring out of the Easter Bunny step this year.
Economic factors may take some spring out of the Easter Bunny step this year. Economic factors may take some of the spring out of the...
Third time I've said that. I'll probably say it 3 more times. See, in my line of work, you got to keep repeating things over and over and over again for the truth to sink in, to kind of catapult the propaganda.
Terrorism, terror, terrorist, terror organization, terrorist attacks, terrorism, terrorist network, terrorist attacks, terrorist group, terrorists, terrorists, instruments of terror, a terror network, terror cells, terrorists, terrorizing terror and murder. They got a catapult of propaganda. Weapons of terror, terrible weapons of mass destruction, chemical weapons of mass destruction, dangerous weapons, even more dangerous weapons, biological weapons, chemical agents, chemical weapons, chemical attacks, chemical and biological weapons, weapons, ballistic missiles, chemical or biological weapons, chemical or biological attack, chemical and biological attacks, poisons, deadly gases, the biological or chemical weapon, instruments of terror, the instruments of mass death, weapons of mass destruction, nuclear weapon, bomb, nuclear weapons, nuclear program, nuclear weapons program, nuclear scientists, nuclear holy warriors, nuclear program and nuclear weapons, nuclear weapon, nuclear technology, biological or chemical or a nuclear weapon. They got a catapult of propaganda.
But here you have the Johnny Appleseed of terrorism wandering the country with his little sack of anthrax. Anthrax. Bacterium, anthrax investigation, anthrax exposure, anthrax tests, with anthrax scares, anthrax spores, anthrax strains, anthrax hoaxes, anthrax attacks, cases of anthrax cases and traces of anthrax, skin anthrax, cutaneous case of anthrax, inhalation anthrax, anthrax in the mail, anthrax through the mail, anthrax tainted letters, anthrax laced letters, anthrax letters, presence of anthrax, no presence of anthrax, positive for anthrax, negative for anthrax, positive for anthrax, also has anthrax, but not anthrax. I don't have anthrax. He does not have anthrax. No anthrax. Crop-dusted Omaha with anthrax. Mass spreading of anthrax. Mutant anthrax. Deadly anthrax. Cure anti-anthrax. Anthrax-fighting drug. Antibiotics. Anthrax vaccine. Smallpox vaccine. That's right. He said smallpox. Smallpox vaccine. That's right. He said smallpox. Back to anthrax. Cure for anthrax. Die from 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 anthrax.
For the next few minutes, I'm going to give you the facts on Ebola. It'll take just 3 minutes.
Ebola.
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 Ebola. Ebola. Ebola.
Ebola. Ebola.
Ebola.
Ebola.
Ebola. Ebola. Ebola. Ebola. Ebola.
Ebola.
Ebola.
Ebola.
Ebola.
Ebola.
Ebola.
Ebola. Ebola.
Ebola.
As you know, this Ebola strain has been much more virulent.
Ebola strains. The Ebola strain.
What
causes Ebola?
Growing Ebola fear spreads around the country.
There are fears the outbreak will continue to spread.
Americans panic over a possible Ebola outbreak.
Fear and panic over a possible Ebola outbreak. Ebola outbreak. Growing fears about Ebola.
Tested for Ebola.
Tested for Ebola.
Tested for Ebola.
Tested for Ebola.
Is there any cure for Ebola?
ZMapp.
So the drug that many people have read about in the media is something called ZMapp.
ZMapp.
This used to be an orphan drug. What companies now actually see the potential for profit in developing an Ebola therapy?
ZMapp.
They are covering the man in a completely airtight containment unit.
Smallpox scare.
That's right, he said smallpox.
6 vials of deadly smallpox.
That's right, he said smallpox. You're probably dead.
Because somebody might weaponize Ebola.
If I were a bioterrorist and I had a chance to weaponize 5, 6, or 7, I would not pick Ebola.
A country that actually weaponized Ebola.
Is there any cure for Ebola?
Monday, the first of 39 healthy volunteers began getting the experimental Ebola vaccine.
The first ever human trials of an Ebola vaccine.
An Ebola vaccine.
Ebola vaccine. Forget the conspiracy. Listen to our government agencies. These guys are telling the truth. You know, there's no conspiracy here, folks. Just get your damn vaccine.
Cure for Ebola.
Die from Ebola.
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 Cure for Ebola.
Hey guys, it's GT here with a outrage that I want to share with you. I'm actually preparing for an interview with Paul Craig Roberts that I'll be recording tomorrow, and that's what I should be focusing on. But in the background, sometimes when I work, I have the television on, and tonight I had the History Channel on. And of course, what does the History Channel play but a promo for a new show they already have ready to broadcast called The ISIS Storm, America on Alert. This was so stunning to me that I had to call up the calendar and say, well, how long has it been since the attacks? Weren't they just last Friday? Yes, they were. Last Friday, November 13th, the attacks in Paris by quote-unquote ISIS, backed by the Pentagon. The attacks occurred last Friday the 13th. These people already have a promo for a new piece of propaganda called the ISIS Storm, America on Alert, ready to go and to be broadcast tomorrow night on the 19th. They must have had this ready to go, but what really outrages me is the propaganda, the police state propaganda, the Mockingbird CIA propaganda that they are shoving down the American people's throats that you're about to see in this promo. Take a look.
Very special. They were shooting towards us. ISIS took its campaign of terror to Europe. They will go after targets purely for the civilian value. They do not care. But the vicious plans of this terror organization don't stop there. They are about violence. They are about death. They are about harming anybody who does not align with their philosophy. The ISIS Storm, America on Alert, tomorrow at 10 on History.
All right, I had to share that just as soon as possible because this propagandist piece of crap is scheduled to air on November 19th. And it's absolutely stunning that these monsters at History Channel are so willing to play ball with the New World Order powers, the CIA, the propagandists coming out of the Pentagon. Do you know why the H in History Channel is yellow? Because they're owned by ABC TV and Hearst, the father of yellow journalism. And that's why we call these people the Mockingbird mainstream media and their networks, because that's what they are. They're propagandists. To hell with the facts that one of the quote-unquote terrorists was found with a Syrian passport, which has proved to be a forgery. And to hell with the fact that CIA Director John Brennan had met with the Mossad intelligence and French intelligence in the weeks leading up to the attacks. And to hell with the facts that now France has engaged NATO by declaring war, which now changes the entire geopolitical picture, bringing France directly into the conflict in Syria, where Russia is already actively trying to defeat the real ISIS, which is the Pentagon puppets over there, the ISIS quote-unquote rebels, which John McCain is buddies with. If this stuff doesn't outrage you and wake up your friends and neighbors, then nothing will. And this is absolutely what History Channel has done with the 9/11 issue. They did it right after 9/11, and they do it every single year on the anniversary leading up to 9/11. They play their propagandist crap.
After the Second World War, the U.S. Army recognized the need to create a soldier that was more willing to kill. Now, this came after reports that many soldiers would purposely miss or aim low when shooting the enemy. Soldiers did not want to kill, and when they did kill, they would feel a lot of remorse. They felt bad about having to kill someone. To remedy this, one method that was used was to have the soldiers watch violent image and screen, especially before going into battle. The effect was to desensitize the soldier to violence, thereby making them more willing to kill.
Now, what's interesting is that back in the 1960s, the Royal Institute of International Affairs and its American branch, Council on Foreign Relations, had one of their international meetings. They held it in England to decide which country, using its film industry, would create the international culture of the future. And this was in the newspapers back then. And it was ultimately agreed upon that Hollywood would be given the job to create the worldwide culture for the general public, for a global society. And it would also be coupled with the music industry, obviously, because they go hand in glove, as Plato said, plus the fashion industry. Plato mentioned that too, and he called it the fashion industry in ancient Greece. Nothing, the more things change, the more they stay the same. And if something works, you don't want to change it. Why change it? Formula of human behavior is just a science. Each part of the direction that you want to go into is just the ability to understand the formulas involved and then what buttons to push and what sequence. And if it's done in the right way, the right presentation, with the right propaganda, the public will react and do exactly as they've been programmed to do. It's worked in the past, it will work in the future. That's why they're utterly confident that they can change society, even back to infanticide if they wish to, because they've done that in ancient Greece, so it was taught and practiced there. So anything can be reintroduced if it's been done in human society before. You just have to know the formula to introduce it. So Hollywood, this amazing industry, probably one of the biggest exports now, maybe the only one left in the US apart from the military. Hollywood is called the Holywood. Holywood. The Holywood, of course, is the staff of the Magi, of the Magus, the Grand Magus in the occults. He waves a wand and everything is altered, changed. He casts a spell. And it's portrayed even in the cartoons with Mickey Mouse with his little wand, as he's dressed like the wizard. And little stars, 5-pointed stars, come from the wand. Earth, air, fire, water, spirit, the 5 points. That's what it means. High drama. And in the ancient Middle Eastern legends, all the holy men there had their staff. We even find it in the Old Testament as Moses has the little contest with the Pharaoh's Magi, and they play it changing sticks into snakes and back again, which is a good trick. But the trick of conducting a spell over the audience is by using a staff, the holy wood. The holy wood also, on another level, is the grove, because in ancient times and in the present times, the bigger boys like to meet in specialized places across the planet in their holy groves. Very, very important. There's much more to this even in Jewish folklore about the groves. And Moses' brass serpent that was coiled around the staff that had made, it's all allegory, of course, for something else, which I understand, but supposedly it was placed in a grove surrounded by trees, and that was a special place for the higher Magi to meet. Some movies will show you the understanding within Hollywood, at least in the director's part. Many of the actors don't even understand it themselves, but the directors and producers certainly do. And some of the bigger ones are given the information and they're advised on how to get it across to the public. It's not that they have geniuses within Hollywood, per se. It's because their job is to program us as we go into the future, always. Hollywood has been an essential part of government, especially in the United States. There are books out on Hollywood's involvement with making war movies. They churned out I don't know how many war movies in World War II. And they had the full cooperation of the American military and the use of squadrons of tanks and ships and everything to make it very, very realistic, to get the recruitment going to fight the Nazis and then the Japanese. Tremendous part of propaganda, and it's never stopped. And even today, the Pentagon admits they have funded some of the bigger movies to do with war and Jarhead and all this kind of nonsense to get the young guys in for recruits. The movie industry is there to indoctrinate you into possibilities which you swallow as possibilities, and then they actually come out in reality. This technique has been used very effectively since the BBC, in fact, first started up as a radio station for World War I, and they used plays and dramas in serial form, so that you should tune in every day to get the next part of the exciting story. And it always made sure that it was a cliffhanger at the end of the hour. And then, sure enough, everyone tuned in the next the next day at the right time to get the next part of the story. But in amongst the drama, they were getting propaganda to do with World War I and why the young guys should join up and how much they'd be respected by the women and they'd be heroes. And this is how the technique is used upon the young people's minds. That's why they don't use older guys in the military, except for generals and so on. Young guys think they're immortal. They want, because of the tribal instinct within them, they want to be a hero. They want to stand out and save the tribe. That's what sports are portraying too. That which you see in a movie form becomes acceptable subconsciously, so that when it comes in reality, you don't react to it. You're familiarized with the idea. And in the movie, of course, it's always presented as a necessity. And in other words, all the bugs have been ironed out subconsciously in your mind for you. It's been downloaded into you, the whole idea and why it's done. So this is Hollywood.
I don't know if you know this, but Antoine LaVey, who was the founder of the Church of Satan, had some very interesting things to say about television. There are television sets in every home, every restaurant, every hotel room, and every shopping mall. Now, they're even small enough to carry in your pocket like electronic rosaries. It is an unquestioned part of everyday life. Kneeling before the cathode ray god, with our TV guide concordance in hand, we maintain the illusion of choice by flipping channels, chapters, and verses. So what he's letting you know here is that television is the satanic Bible, that in fact you can find television television is in fact mind controlled, that is satanic. And this is the church founder of the Church of Satan telling you this. The birth of television was a magical event foreshadowing its satanic significance. Boom. Done. If you're going to deny that TV is satanic, I, a born-again Christian who has eyes to see what's actually going on in the world, and even Antoine LaVey, the founder of the Church of Satan, recognizes that television is satanic, and it is very significant to the Satanist. The first commercial broadcast was aired on, April 30th, 1939 at New York World's Fair. Since then, TV's infiltration has been, pay attention here, TV's infiltration has been so gradual, so complete, that no one, except us and my subscribers, even noticed. People don't need to go to church anymore. They get their morality plays on television. You see, this is what I'm saying. They're feeding you satanic philosophies and propaganda. And it's literally like tuning into a satanic church. The only difference is you don't know you're getting preached a satanic sermon. It is in the disguise of a cartoon, a TV broadcast show, whatever. It's propaganda for Satanism, and you can't deny it because the church founder himself recognizes this. So it's addictive, reduction in higher brain function, by the way. TV viewers reduced higher brain activity, promoting activity in lower brain regions. In other words, it makes you less intelligent and behave more like an animal. So turn the TV off, okay? Go outside, get some fresh air. Now, some people are so brainwashed by television and have gotten so used to the satanic altar that they bow down to, they cannot view themselves living without it. Short attention span as well. An increase in excessive television watch can leave you at risk for hyperactivity and not being able to pay attention. I see the effects of this. People watch a video for about 10 seconds and then jump to a conclusion which is false and make comments which don't even relate to the video. So I see the lack of attention span that's increasing. This is leading to a lack of comprehension of what is actually being presented. That is why oftentimes I'll present a video and people will post something that makes no sense, isn't even relevant to the video, because they don't have an attention span. They weren't even listening or capable of listening. They've been so brainwashed, dumbed down by the satanic television mind control that they can't even pay attention anymore. So I'll leave this here. Impaired children development, everything. I mean, it's literally controlling you people. subliminal messaging and pictures. I mean, I've covered that. There's a reason they recognize the subconscious effects on the brain, and that is why constantly this stuff is shoved in our face.
So what was really disturbing is that we found a lot of hypersexuality of the female characters in even television and movies aimed at little kids. For example, in G-rated animated films, the female characters wear the same amount of sexually revealing clothing as the female characters in R-rated movies, which is pretty horrifying. I mean, what are we putting that much sexuality and hypersexuality into things aimed at the littlest kids for? There was research that just came out that showed that girls as young as 6 years old have started to self-sexualize. In other words, they have started seeing themselves through the male gaze and realizing that they need to be sexy in order to be appreciated at 6 years old. And this is a very new development. We knew that women and teenage girls were doing that. So clearly the culture is sending a very negative message to girls and to boys about girls when the female characters are constantly shown in this sexy light.
Hey brothers and sisters, it's Jared. In this video we're going to be taking a look at the sexualization and propaganda that's coming from our fallen media towards our children. Now if you're an older person or you don't have children, you think maybe this doesn't apply to you. It does. It's happening in the adult shows too. If you're someone who's struggling with sexual sin or pornography and you're still watching movies and television, you need to do a heart check, because you see, the whole entire point of the media of this world is to promote sex. Sex sells. So if you are in the throes of battle with sexual sin, and for your entertainment and free time you sit yourself down in front of this sexual propaganda and wickedness, then you do not understand your foe. And I will tell you plainly in love, you are being unwise. If you are a parent, understand that they are gearing this same wickedness towards your children, and it is going to grow worse and worse. The reason why we are seeing young girls so sexualized, getting into sexual relations at younger and younger ages, teen pregnancy skyrocketing off the charts, is because of what they are being saturated with. It is wickedness, it is the godless society, and we are going to see more and more of this as the society's mind becomes darkened, rejecting the Creator and Father God, and following after the creation and the lusts of the flesh.
What happens in the Barbie Ultimate Closet? Make fashion news. 4 pairs of shoes. 4 purses. Tell me which dress looks the best. All 3. There's room for more. Fashionistas know what a closet's for. Hang it on the rack. Hang it on the door. Put it on the shelf. Put it in the drawer. Show your fashion abilities. The Barbie Ultimate Closet. Wow! Ultimate Closet. Move over, queen. We're on the throne. Kicking back just like home. Got me in right. All right. Changing for the raging ball tonight. Regal people party now. Look who gets to wear the crown. What we're talking about is
As we compare what this world is teaching our young girls through this propaganda and brainwashing commercials and television shows and characters, we can see in 1 Peter 3 that it is the exact opposite of what God's Word teaches us. In 1 Peter 3:3 it says, whose adorning, let it not be that outward adorning of plaiting the hair and of wearing of gold or of putting on of apparel, but let it be the hidden man of the heart in that which is not corruptible, even the ornament of a meek and quiet spirit, which is in the sight of God of great price. You see, it is not sin for a woman to dress well or carry herself well or even to wear makeup. But if that is the way that you adorn yourself, if that is the way that you gauge your beauty, you have been deceived by this culture, by this world that is telling you how to live. Your outward appearance is corruptible, but your inner man, empowered by the Holy Spirit of God, grows more and more beautiful as you grow in grace. Now we are teaching our young girls, our daughters, to emulate this world. We are giving them these little idols dressed up as the fallen spirit of this world, the culture of this world, which believes that the outward is what is to be showcased. The outward body is what is to be praised. To parade the flesh around as those who have no discernment and no understanding. Our young children, boys and girls, are constantly being bombarded with these images and these ideals from the media of this world, also even the toy culture of this world. And the people who are making this stuff are from the satanic system. The Bible tells us the love of money is the root of all evil. And these people are selling this stuff to our children for money. They don't care about what it does or the effects on culture, no matter how many studies are done, no matter how many warnings are put out, or just the evidence of looking at our culture and seeing the effects that it is having on young girls around us. They do not care. They love money more than they care for the effects that it is having on the people around us. We are seeing girls follow after these demonic dolls. We are seeing the children running after the lust of the flesh, thinking that if they are beautiful, that they will be accepted and loved. And it should come as no surprise, because it is the way we have raised them up from a young age if we subject them to the media of this fallen world. The Bible exhorts us, raise your child in the way they should go, and when they are old, they will not depart from it. Do not be deceived. This media is of Antichrist, and it is intent on destroying the love of God in your children's life. Let us be a holy people in these last days. God bless, and be well in the Lord.
I am a pediatrician, a researcher, and a parent, and I became those things in that order. And the reason the sequencing is important is because even though I was a doctor who took care of children for a while, and I was a researcher who studied ways to keep them healthy, it wasn't until I became a parent that I got interested in, some might even say obsessed with, early learning. It was 14 years ago when my son was born, and I took a month paternity leave to be with him in his third month of life. And now in retrospect, as a pediatrician, I should have known better, because I opted for the time when colic crescendos. And I spent that month with him in a snuggly, bouncing on a big blue ball and watching more daytime television than I have in my life, and noticed that he was actually interested in it. As much as I like to believe that my 2-month-old was following CNN as closely as I was, it was obvious to me that he wasn't, and yet something about that experience was important to him. Now, why do these early experiences matter? The typical newborn brain is 333 grams. And in the first 2 years of life, it actually triples in size. It's an extraordinary period of brain growth, unparalleled over the life course. And you can see that here. Here is brain growth over the lifespan. And you can see how steep the rise is early on. And it continues to grow until about age 20. And I'll let you guys in the audience find yourselves over on the right there. and see why you had such a hard time finding your car keys this morning. Now, we're actually born with a lifetime supply of brain cells or neurons. That's not what actually grows. It's the connections between those brain cells, what we call synapses, that account for that brain growth. And those synapses form based on early experiences. If you will, the mind is fine-tuned to the world that babies inhabit. And to give you an example of that you can all relate to, any child born anywhere in the world can learn to speak any language fluently. But if she isn't exposed to certain sounds early in the first few years of her life, she can learn to speak another language later, but she'll never sound like a native speaker. So a baby born today in mainland China, as amazing as it is, can learn to speak fluent Mandarin. But if she doesn't hear English sounds early in her life, she can learn to speak English later. But as we all know, we know such people, she'll struggle making certain sounds. It wasn't because she wasn't born with that capacity. It was because her early experience didn't condition her mind to learn them. Now, this graphic actually shows just that. What you see is the brain, and you see the neurons and the synapses connecting them. We're born with about 2,500 synapses. By age 3, we have 15,000. And then over time, those connections are actually pruned in response to the external stimulation, the external world that we live in. Now, to give you another example of that, this is the breathing pattern of a one-day-old infant listening to music. And you can see here that he's listening to Mozart, and then Stravinsky is put on, and then Mozart again. Now, I show you this not to present some kind of an infantile critique of classical music, but and those of you in the audience who are classic music aficionados might have a hypothesis about why Stravinsky did this to his breathing pattern. But the point is that even at one day of life, there's a discernible physiological reaction to what babies are actually hearing. Now, we know from decades of research that too little stimulation early on is bad for brain development. I show you here 2 PET scans. Now, PET scans are measures of brain function. The brighter colors show more brain activity. And on the left is a PET scan of a normal kindergartner. And on the right is a PET scan of a child who was raised in a horribly neglected environment. This is actually a PET scan from a child who was raised in a Romanian orphanage and was profoundly neglected early in life. And you'll notice that there are areas of his brain that show no activity at all. It didn't develop as a result of too little stimulation. Now, this is a horrific example of too little stimulation and the untoward consequences of it. But the question we've had in our lab for some time is, what about too much? Is it actually possible to overstimulate the developing brain, or more appropriately, to inappropriately stimulate the developing brain in ways that are actually not beneficial but harmful? And this is important because we're technologizing childhood today in a way that's unprecedented. In 1970, the average age at which children began to watch television regularly was 4 years, like this cute little girl here. And today, based on research that we've done, it's 4 months. It's not just how early they watch, but how much they watch. The typical child before the age of 5 is watching about 4.5 hours of TV a day. That represents as much as 40% of their waking hours. Which brings us to Baby Einstein. Now, many of you probably have not seen Baby Einstein, but I will show you a random 20-second clip from Baby Einstein Day on the Farm, and here it is. In that 20-second clip, there were 7 scene changes, about 1 every 3 seconds. It's about the most exhausting day on the farm since John Steinbeck's Grapes of Wrath. And of course, it's nothing like being on a real farm, right? Adults watching this find it discombobulating because your mind is trying to make a coherent narrative out of this, and there is no coherent narrative. It jumps all over the place. But babies aren't trying to make a coherent narrative out of it. They're not capable of doing that. It's all of that screen change, all of that stimulation that's keeping them actually engaged in the screen. So we've had for a while what we call the overstimulation hypothesis, which is that prolonged exposure to this rapid image change during this critical window of brain development would precondition the mind to expect high levels of input, and that would lead to inattention in later life. So you watch enough Baby Einstein Day on the Farm as a baby, and when you go to a farm as a school-age child, it's boring. It's too slow. How come there's no sheep suddenly popping into my face? How come there's no marionette going back and forth? Why do I have to walk from here to there? That's the general idea, that you're conditioning the mind to that reality, which doesn't actually exist. And we tested this some years ago, and what we found was that the more television children watched before age 3, the more likely they were to actually have attentional problems at school age. Specifically, for each hour that they watched before the age of 3, their chances of having attentional problems was increased by about 10%. So a child who watched 2 hours of TV a day before the age of 3 would be 20% more likely to have attention problems compared to a child who watched none. Now, what else did we find? We found that the more cognitive stimulation children received, and we measured cognitive stimulation in terms of how often parents read to their child, how often they took them to the museum, how often they sang to them, we found that cognitive stimulation reduced the chances of attentional problems later in life. In fact, each hour of cognitive stimulation reduced them by about 30%. So if you will, these are two sides of the same coin. There are certain things that we can do early on in our children's lives that enhance their ability to pay attention, and certain things that we can do early on that actually impede them. Now, if our hypothesis was right, that it's based on the pacing of the programs, and you might imagine that what children watch actually is important. And so content would be key. And I'll give you 2 examples of content to illustrate that point. The first is the Powerpuff Girls movie, the right mix of sugar and spice for a satisfying rush. I don't know how many of you have seen that, but here's a scene from that. Okay, so that was, again, you can see a lot of rapid sequencing. In fact, this was the first movie that was ever rated PG for non-stop frenetic animated action. I'm not making it up, that's the back of the box there. Now, I want to contrast that with something that I'm sure you're all very familiar with. Really needs no introduction, but this is a clip from Mr. Rogers for you to watch.
Hi, Odd.
Oh, hi,
How are you?
Fred. I'm fine. How are you?
Good, thanks. I brought my television neighbor to see what a restaurant was like.
Oh, I'm so glad. Can I show you a table?
Certainly.
I'm awfully busy today. One of the waitresses is ill.
I see.
So I'm sort of doing double duty. How about this?
This is fine. Thank you
Grand.
very much.
Sit down and I'll be right back.
All right. Now, when you come to a restaurant, usually somebody shows you what table you're supposed to sit at. And one of the first things you do is to put your napkin either on your lap or up here. And then, well, this is the way a table is set.
So, Fred Rogers invented reality TV. He's not credited with it. Actually, it's not reality, right? It's even slower paced than reality. The waitress says, "I'm awfully busy," but she doesn't seem the least bit hurried. So you can see that there are very, very real differences in pacing. And when we followed up our study with a subsequent experiment to look at what children actually watch, what you see is that educational programs like Mr. Rogers pose no increased risk of attentional problems. Entertainment programs like the Powerpuff Girls movie increase the chances by about 60%. And violent programming, which I didn't show you, increases it even by more than 100%. And violent programs are typically even more rapidly sequenced. Now, in the last year, we've been building actually a mouse model of television viewing in my lab. And you are now watching mouse TV here. The sounds are from the Cartoon Network, and the lights are basically photorhythmically generated by those sounds. This is what it looks like. These are the TV lounges here that the mice live in. and they have speakers above and lights around them. And what we do is we start about 10 days of life, and these mice watch TV 6 hours a day for 42 days. It's basically their entire childhood spent in front of a television, which is not uncommon these days for some children even. And then 10 days later, we actually assess their behavior in a few ways I want to show with you. The first test we do measures their activity and risk-taking. Now, we do what's called the open field test. Now, mice have two kind of competing instincts. You'll see them here. One is to avoid being in the middle of anything, because, of course, mice have very few friends, and being in the middle of this open field is risky. But, of course, they have a competing instinct to forage for food. So at some point, they do need to go into the middle and explore their environment. Now, we put these mice in here and test them, and we exploit the fact that it's a white mouse on a black background. And with a computer above, we can actually track their movement. And you can see on the left is sort of a normal mouse spending most of its time around the perimeter. But look at the one on the right. Notice how much time it spends in the middle, but also notice just how much general activity this mouse is actually exhibiting. So this is both a hyperactive and a risk-taking mouse. And when we look at our overstimulated compared to our control mice, we find that the overstimulated mice spend more time in the center, and they enter the center more than the regular mice do. The next test we do is what's called the novel object recognition, and this tests short-term memory and learning. We put a mouse in a box with two objects, and the mouse will explore both of them, get to know them, if you will. And then we take the mouse out, and an hour later we replace one object with a novel object. And we see how much time the mouse spends on each object. Now, the mouse that is learning, that has good short-term memory, will spend more time on the novel object. And you can see that here, as opposed to the one on the right, which is spending the same amount of time with both objects. And what did we find? Well, we found that our control mice, our normal mice, spent 75% of their time with a novel object. But look at what our TV viewing, our overstimulated mice did. They spent the exact same amount of time. It was as if they couldn't distinguish the two objects or they didn't care. But one way or another, they were not learning. They were not acting like normal mice. Now, I want to talk a little bit about a study we did with children. It's a building block study. It was a randomized trial here in a low-income clinic in Seattle. We took 200 children who were 18 to 24 months of age, and we gave half of them blocks at the beginning of the study and half of them blocks at the end. And their parents got what we call blocktivities monthly. These were ways to play with your children with blocks. Sort the blocks, stack the blocks, count the blocks. Really simple things that come naturally to a lot of parents, but what a lot of low-income parents don't do with their children regularly. And here's what happened. The children who got the blocks, 59% of them played with them on a typical day, as opposed to 13% who didn't get the blocks initially. They played for about 20 minutes a day, about 1.5 episodes a day, and about 65% of the time was with their parent. And then 6 months later, we assessed their language. And see on the right here that the kids who got the blocks late scored in the 42nd percentile, which is below average, but unfortunately not uncommon in low-income populations in Seattle and, for that matter, around the world. And the kids who got the blocks, they actually scored at 56th percentile. Significantly better and slightly above average. So promoting that kind of interactive play actually promoted language development in these young children. So I want to conclude by impressing on you that early childhood is very important for children and for mice, and it's critical to their development. And we need more real-time play today and less fast-paced media, particularly for young children. It's vitally important that we have that, because if we change the beginning of the story, we change the whole story. Thank you very, very much.
Hi, Atlanta. We're about to have a short course in missile identification. This is a Scud. You can tell it by its distinctive label. Now, when the missile is launched, the first thing you look for is the plume sticking out behind it. Now, when you detect this, you can tell it's been launched. Thank you.
See the graffiti on it? Yeah, show me graffiti.
Larry King show or bust. Look at this.
Look
at this. Look at this shit. Look at.
Believe that. Let me say hi.
The top 10 things about Saudi Arabia. Maybe we could shorten the list to 5. Oh, God.
Okay, we're going to stop it for you, freeze frame it for you, and take a close look. You'll see that blue screen background, for those of you that are skeptical, might still be thinking that it's sky. Look real close. It comes to an abrupt end like it's wrapped around something. It's a blue backdrop, folks. It's a blue screen. You'll also see a shadow being cast on it where our arrow is pointing. And it looks to me, those of us that are in the recording industry, it looks very much like a boom microphone might be casting a shadow on it from above. Now, also notice that the camera's facing down. If that were a blue sky, obviously you'd see other buildings in the background or some kind of skyline, a mountain range or something, unless that camera was facing up. But it's facing down. You can see that very clearly. It's facing down to get the image of the fella sitting in the chair. In general, that's definitely a blue screen, folks. And you'll see in the next shots that they're not going to be clowning around anymore. They're going to be pretending that they're very scared. But because you know there's a blue screen behind them, you'll know that they're filming it in some studio somewhere, not really in a situation where live bombs are going off. They do this all the time, folks.
A couple of explosions, what may have been an outgoing Patriot ground-to-air missile, some reported airbursts that may have been an intercept of an incoming Scud missile. We're really not sure. All we know is that the air raid sirens have gone off, and we've heard the outgoing roar of at least one Patriot missile. We've heard some sort of airburst. We can't tell where it was from where we are right now. We're waiting to see what's happening. As you can hear, the air raid sirens are still going off around us. People are, strangely enough, used to it. This is the first one of these attacks that's taken place early in the morning, but they're not showing you anything other than what we've got now. What did you see there? Is that a missile going out? No. We're not quite sure. We can't show you anything else than what we're seeing right now. Because of military regulations, we are not allowed to show you where the missiles might be going, what direction they might be flying in, where the airbursts might be taking place. There's obviously something going on. We heard another dull roar that shook things a little bit, and we're waiting to see what else is going on. Right now, that's about all we know, that something is happening. We're hearing pops and things shaking. All right, we are now led to understand that there are also firings in another city in Saudi Arabia. CNN's Carl Rochelle is here with me. He just came up. Carl, I know we can't be very specific given these restrictions, but within those parameters, what did you see?
Well, what I saw, I didn't see anything hit. I looked almost straight above us. There is a vapor trail coming from my right to my left, and there's a cloud of something. It looks like it might have been an explosion, a cloud. I'd say it was... My apologies for please putting on the gas.
What I have here is some amazing proof and evidence right in front of your face of deception by the mainstream media and by CNN especially. You have Nancy Grace and Ashley Banfield acting like they are far away from each other, and they are broadcasting to the satellite and it's coming back down. She's having to use her earpiece and all this. Check it out. I want you to pay attention to the red truck and the bus. Red truck, bus. bus in the background. They've been busted red-handed, and they're trying to act like they're talking. I mean, it is so funny because they're trying to actually act like they're not sitting 30 feet away from each other. It's ridiculous. But this is the kind of deception that they use, because if there wasn't this traffic and anything to prove it, if there was not those moving vehicles in the background to prove it, you would never know. No one would have ever known. Eyes open, folks. I'll leave a link.
According to this nationwide survey, more doctors smoke Camels than any other cigarette. Try Camels yourself, the cigarette so many doctors enjoy.
We have so many options for news. There are hundreds of TV stations, newspapers, and radio shows. But the truth is that almost every avenue from which we get our information in the mainstream media is controlled by only 6 corporations. So who are the big 6 corporations that control nearly everything you see, hear, and read? First, there's Comcast, formerly owned by GE, which controls MSNBC, NBC, and Telemundo. And there's Disney, which owns ABC, the History Channel, and and ESPN. Next, Viacom, the parent company of MTV, Paramount, and BET. CBS, with all its affiliates. And there's News Corp, which owns Fox News, the New York Post, and the Wall Street Journal. And finally, Time Warner, the parent company of CNN, Time, and People magazine, as well as Warner Brothers. 2 cases come to mind that are the most egregious. The first one was News Corp. Fox News was going to air a story on the bovine growth hormone, BGH, bovine growth hormone, of course, another Monsanto case of censorship where they were invested in Monsanto for advertising, and their boss said no when a team of Fox investigative reporters wanted to cover this story. Monsanto threatened the station, sent them a letter saying there will be dire consequences, this is a direct quote, dire consequences for Fox News if the story is aired. And I wanted to play what happened when they confronted their boss about this.
I said, this is news. This is important. This is stuff people need to know. And I'll never forget, he didn't pause a beat, and he said, we just paid $3 billion for these television stations. We'll tell you what the news is. The news is what we say it is.
So really, I mean, you look at this case, and it's such an egregious case of censorship, and really he's saying, we'll tell you what the news is. The news is whatever we want it to be.
Back in 1998, kind of a very clear-cut example, ABC was 2020, they were going to air this story about how Disneyland is actually hiring pedophiles. I mean, it's just a crazy story. You're thinking a theme park for kids, and pedophiles just sounds terrible. They weren't able to pull the story. Why? Because Disney owns ABC. It's to downplay pedophiles. But when you look at cases like CNN's running a story about the BP oil spill, the Deepwater Horizon spill, about the cleanup efforts and how, things are getting better. And as soon as the segment's over, you see a commercial come on, and it's BP.
But Project Censored, one of the greatest, research organizations in the country about censorship in the media, did a study where they found that 118 people only sit on 288 corporate boards that unify kind of this media conglomerate.
A lot of execs that sit in corporations and you said it in your introduction, they're sitting on, for example, NBC, Citigroup, Exxon, Philip Morris. Their execs sit on board of directors for Philip Morris. Mm-hmm. That's not okay. CBS has board members sitting in Walmart, General Dynamics. These are drone manufacturers. The execs for CBS are the same guys that are sitting in the board of directors for drone manufacturers. And I think, how is that okay?
And I think when people think of the corporate media, they're like, oh, well, of course, the corporate media. But really, we're talking about NPR and PBS as well. I mean, NPR was running a story during the BP oil spill featuring a scientist that was talking about how bacteria that would eat the oil. It was like, well, this bacteria is just going to clean up the oil itself. We don't have to worry about anything. Turns out later, according to Greg Palast, the scientist interviewed about the story was given $500 million, $500 million
exactly.
From BP. NPR never mentioned this detail, this quaint detail, when they were doing the story. And of course, we saw PBS.
The thing about that, the money that, we're talking about one guy that received $500 million. That money, that money actually spread out. It was more like a money spill, is what Greg Palast said.
It's been Washington's biggest mystery since Watergate. What kind of dog will the Obamas choose? Our resident veterinarian, Dr.
We have to pass the bill so that you can find out what is in it.
And look, this is one time. Forget the conspiracy. Listen to our government agencies. These guys are telling the truth. You know, there's no conspiracy here, folks. Just get your damn vaccine.
All right. Thank you, doctor. Thank you.
Mercury-containing vaccines may help, not harm kids, according to 2 new studies in the journal Pediatrics. There have been widespread concerns that mercury-based preservatives in vaccines might impair the neurological development of children. These new studies suggest that the opposite, that the preservatives may actually be associated with improved behavior and mental performance.
I think people should be careful what they wish for on China. You know, if China were to revalue its currency, or China is to start making, say, toys that don't have lead in them or food that isn't poisonous, their costs of production are going to go up. And that means prices at Walmart here in the United States are going to go up too. So I would say China is our greatest friend right now. They're keeping prices low and they're keeping prices for...
Today, 6 corporations control all major media in the United States, including the principal television networks. These 6 corporate entities, in turn, control the information being broadcast on a daily basis. The average American adult watches more than 4 hours of television each day. The constant flow of entertainment, news, and information that is consumed by the American public shapes their perception of the reality in which they live. By controlling the dissemination of information, broadcasters and their corporate heads are able to control the masses. The constant, carefully shaped messages on television guide the public to predetermined conclusions. Therefore, TV has become a weapon of mass persuasion. In order to take back our minds and our lives, we must first unplug the signal. Turn off your televisions. Cancel your cable and satellite subscriptions. Seek alternative news sources. Spend time with your family and connect with your neighbors and local community. Discuss and learn. Allow new information to challenge your thoughts and opinions. When we unplug the signal, we begin to realize that the world matrix that surrounds us is false. Many things we once thought of as true are lies. Never let us forget the truth will not be televised.
My dear friends, brothers, and sisters in this struggle to find the truth in our world, we could have added hundreds of additional speakers here, detailing many more issues with this device that was very accurately dubbed the boob tube, even very early on in its inception. Every aspect of television is harmful to your mind and thereby your life itself, as it truly does decay the mind and one's ability to think for oneself. Even programs that seem mild, like gardening shows, craft shows, cooking shows, they're all non-participant shows or programs that, yes, they program you to stay away from other people, teaching one to love the isolation in one's own tiny imaginary world of television, where there's never any need to think for oneself or debate thoughts with others. Thus, you're slowly conditioned to recoil in fear to the slightest thought of having to communicate or talk or even debate with others. Even the most innocent time spent watching television is a booster shot, if you will, reinforcing one's descending desire to mingle with others in the real world, or to exchange thoughts, sift through the lies for the truth yourself, and grow intellectually. The television takes all that away from you by very simply convincing you that it is the authority in your mind. Television literally therefore teaches us to submit to the wisdom of the producers, which we all now know are mouthpieces for those who are slowly chaining us up like slaves. Everything, and I mean everything presented on television's airwaves, is designed to at least draw you in, to get you hooked on watching the TV on a routine basis. And just like a moth being drawn to the flame, the attraction and mesmerizing flicker of the flame is more overpowering than one's knowledge to stay out of the fire. As we've seen in this film, television has a very serious power over the mind and has become an amazingly powerful tool for Satan and his like-minded sadomasochists of the world who want to see you suffer. Some of you who know me know that I have spent many years working with drug addicts in my ministry, and I can tell you with great experience that I believe television to be more destructive than heroin itself. Heroin can take the mind into a very serious trance state, yeah, but at least it can't also at the same time pump information into your brain that can create an even greater zombie-like state in you even when the trance wears off. Television takes you into a trance, then teaches you how to hate everything that can help you maintain freedom, peace, and love, and those wonderful things in your life. Heroin can't preach to you when you're under its spell like television can. Even those of you who may not believe in the God of the Bible, ask yourselves why you don't. Is it not because television and the schools have all programmed you to believe in evolution, which is now being scientifically proven to be utterly impossible? My dear friends, they can only enslave you and turn you into mindless robots for them if you first let your guard down. Just like Eve in the Garden of Eden, she sat at the foot of the serpent and listened intently with her imagination taking over how she could be as a god. Who became her preacher in such a case? Was she still listening to the Father in heaven and obeying him on how to keep herself happy and free? Or was she listening to Satan in the garden? Is not television Satan's pulpit, his false prophet, if you will? His ways of spreading his own imaginary good news or gospel, hoping to draw you away from the safety of God and into the flames of hell with him? Do you feel betrayed and victimized after watching this film? Do you feel embarrassed that you've been taken for a ride for so long? Then come on, folks, follow the growing number of us who want to get back to the better ways of life. Do as many of us have done and shut off that TV. Cancel your cable plans. Why pay the corporate media to turn your mind into mush? Do as Levi did, who sat at the gate of customs, who, when he saw and heard the true good news of Christ, then rose up, left all, and followed him. And please don't think that these television moguls are somehow going to allow any real preachers on their airwaves either. That's television or radio. You're not going to find it. Because as you've just seen, who owns all these, those very people do not want you anywhere near the truth of that Bible. That's their whole purpose, to get you folks far and away from the God of the Bible, because they know that if you knew the truth inside that genuine Bible, you'd then have the wisdom and power through the Father to crush these tyrants to powder. You can read much more about that and a lot more in the popular new free mini ebook called Bullies for Satan on our website. Let me ask you to ponder one final thought, and this is just hypothetically, mind you. What if the television talking heads began to teach the world a whole new method of doing mathematics? Let's say they turn it so far upside down that no one could understand it but them now. Could you make change at the store? Could you figure out your bills every month? No. Eventually the whole world would be totally incapable of the simple act of counting money or even estimating their own worth, becoming completely helpless and at the full mercy of those holding the guns under their chins, who then would just be saying, give more, or we'll shoot, okay? That's almost here. That day's almost here, my friends. They've dumbed us down from an even more valuable knowledge base, the knowledge of how to overcome such evil in the first place. They have almost completely trained us to hate the instructions of love given to us by the God of the Bible. They have caused the world to forget that Yahweh, the God of the Bible, had given us a perfect government system built on love. A social owner's manual of sorts, where, if followed, leaves absolutely no loopholes or footholds for a single tyrant or criminal to even get a start in such a system of truth, justice, and, love. How about it, folks? Which do you prefer? The growing corporate beast system built on greed, hate, and bloodshed, or a system of peaceful governance built on love? Shouldn't we get back to those commandments that teach love, keep us in line with one another, that we all get along together? Join us, folks, as we shut off their terrifying false prophet and instead open God's Bible. We want a world of love and peace. How about you? Blessings to all of you who love and yearn for the truth. Hallelujah. All good things are down, and the times are great. I've been on my walk with my Lord Yahweh. We'll be safe from harm, having found our way. Oh, a resurrection dreaming on Yahweh's wrathful day. Ran from a large church, I passed along the way. I had gotten on my knees till they pretended to pray. Oh, their preacher's heart was cold, said Yahweh's law was done away. So a resurrection dreaming on Yahweh's wrathful day. Down, and the times are great. I've been on my walk with my Lord His way. If I hadn't found Him, I'd still be lost today. So a resurrection dreaming on Yahweh's wrathful day. On Yahweh's wrathful day, on Yahweh's wrathful day, on Yahweh's wrathful day.